All right, look at this monument. Today's adventure takes us to Plainfield, Illinois, and to Plainfield Township Cemetery. Now, this cemetery is the oldest cemetery I've ever been in. The first burial here is 1804. That is Sally Bliss. I don't know if we're going to find her grave today. We have about 6 inches of snow up here, which brings me to my second point. It's 8 degrees, which is, about between minus 10 and minus 15 Celsius. It's a little cold out. This is the coldest walk I've ever done. And the third thing today, and this is the most important thing, I have a great story for you. A story about an aviation pioneer named Eddie Gardner. Now, this guy was the first guy to fly the airmail route New York to Chicago and back. We're going to find his grave today. So join me as we explore this wonderful cemetery. Okay. Wow. What a beautiful day, but cold. Very crisp. But look at this beautiful snow-covered cemetery here. I mean, isn't that just beautiful? Got some animal tracks in there, and that's really about it. Really a nice cemetery. Let's explore some of these old monuments out here. Just great stuff. Right away. And I apologize in advance if you hear a lot of breathing. My nose is stuffed up from the cold. I'm breathing through my mouth. And I'd rather do that than you hear me sniffling every 10 seconds. This is Wood Monument. Edwin Wood. And it looks like there's a history of Edwin Wood here. Looks like he was a member of the Stock Exchange. He did a lot of stuff. Commissioner of West Chicago Park. Commissioner, New Orleans World Exposition. Editor, New York Commercial Advisor. Man, this guy did a lot. Wow. Looks like he graduated law school. Amazing. Amazing. And there's the bust of Edwin up there. Just great. My other consideration today is the battery power on my equipment. It's going to be going quickly as these cold temperatures and electronic devices usually do not cooperate. Got some folks buried there, the woods, more woods. And here we have John Burrell, Captain Company D, Illinois Infantry, 1827 to May 30th, 1864. Thank you, sir, for your service. I'm sure there's a lot of Civil War soldiers buried here. This is a neat old one. Mary A is the name. Wow, really nice. Okay, as we walk here, so there's nearly 6,000 graves in this cemetery, and as I said, it goes back to 1804, so it's nearly 220 years of age. As I mentioned in the intro, Sally Bliss is the first burial here at age 24 in 1804. There's also a Major League Baseball player buried in here. His name is George Lefty Pierce. He pitched for the Chicago Cubs from 1912 to 1916. He died in 1935. We're going to go. There's really cool monument that I want to check out over here. All right, look at this monument. How cool is that? It looks like a A small log cabin. Reuben Flagg died November 9th, 1869. 71 years old, was among the four first families that settled in Will County. That is really remarkable. He's got the rest of the family here. Let's take a look at this. Likeness of the, I wonder if this was in the likeness of the cabin that he actually lived in. You could see the chimney, the brickwork on it, and then below it, the stonework. That's fabulous. And let's see what this side looks like. Wow, it says Flag, and then you have a window and a door and even a rope on the door. And look at this. The rope is even worn away where you would be pulling it. That is fabulous. And the shape that is in is incredible. Absolutely incredible shape. I love that monument. That is wonderful. Another great monument here. Very tall. That's about 20 feet tall. It's hard to read. It's an orange cone. Oh, there's an inscription. There's a plaque on here. This memorial has been dedicated to those of the Plainfield area who gave their all for their country in the war between the states, April 12th, 1861, April 9th, 1865. So that's what this is. And you can see there are some names engraved on this. So this is an old monument that they had put a plaque on, it looks like in 1991. All right, as we continue our walk, let's talk a little bit about Eddie Gardner. Fascinating story about this man. So Eddie Gardner lived from 1888 to 1921. And as I said in the intro, he was credited with flying the first round trip airmail route from New York to Chicago and back. Van Horn Monument here. Oh, that's pretty cool. Not only is it the wood, but you have a squirrel with an acorn on a branch. That is great. That's wonderful. So Eddie Gardner, he started off life as a chauffeur and a mechanic in Chicago, and he loved auto racing. So he purchased a race car from a man named Benjamin Lipsner, who at the time was the first superintendent of the airmail service. Mr. Lipsner hired Gardner to be an airmail pilot at some point. I think it was around 1917 or 1918. This is a pretty tombstone. It looks like a harp. Died in 1871. And this one over here is wonderful as well. Brown is the name. And it's a tall one. Got more emergency vehicles. Charles Brown, age 69 years. Not exactly sure what happened, but emergency vehicles are passing by, as you can hear them in the distance. Let them pass by and I'll be back. So Gardner had the nickname Turkey Bird because his takeoffs resembled a turkey trying to fly. They're pretty wobbly. Here's Elmer here, Private Company E, 1843 to 1866. Thank you for your service. I wanted to check out this one. But Gardner was a little offended by that nickname, Turkey Bird, so he shortened it to Turk Bird. He was okay with that. Cyril's is the name. DeWitt Clinton Searles, 1890, and Harriet, 1893. A great monument. I mean, this thing is a very large monument. Okay, so on September 5th, 1918, Gardner, along with a fellow pilot, a friend of his by the name of Max Miller, were tasked to survey the route between New York and Chicago for the airmail service. So they were pretty much the first ones to do this. But although the two men were friends, they were very much competitors as well. And they took off from New York. They took off from Belmont Park in New York on that morning, September 5th, 1918. At 7:08 a.m. is when Miller departed. The problem was Gardner had a little problem with his tail skid, because these were biplanes, and these had they were tail draggers, so the tail did drag along the ground, and he had some damage, and he needed to repair it, so he wasn't able to take off right away. So Miller took off. He circled the park for a while, ended up getting impatient and waved goodbye to the thousands of people that were there waiting for them to depart, and he went on his way. Gardner was forced to use a backup plane because the damage to his primary plane was a little too much. So after fixing the plane, or going to his backup plane, Gardner took off and left for Chicago. Okay, so Gardner made it to Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, where some bad weather grounded him for a while. Now, you've got to remember this. This was the pioneering days of aviation. Another great monument here, Henry Weller, 1940, and his wife, Laura. That's great. They did not have modern avionic equipment, that these aircraft do now. They didn't have GPS. They didn't have navigational aids. They had a crude map, and they would look for landmarks on the ground. A lot of times they would follow railroad tracks. So these guys not only were open to the elements, because these were biplanes that had open cockpits, but they didn't have any navigational aids except for maps. So occasionally they would have to land in a farm field and ask the farmer for directions if they got lost. This is really neat. Look at this. Wow. Lockwood Dairy. That is fantastic. Lockwood stone. Look at that. That is just beautiful. Zerrell, Zerrell, Lockwood. 1990, he died in Florence, 1988. That is a beautiful stone. Absolutely great. Okay, so what happened was they both departed. Miller made it to Cleveland about 8:25 p.m., but he had radiator problems. So that kept him there all night and most of the next day fixing his radiator. So that allowed Gardner a chance to catch up. However, Miller still made it to Chicago before Gardner. And Miller landed in Grant Park in Chicago with, I guess, thousands of people were there to cheer him on. So on the flight back from Chicago to New York, went a little bit smoother. Miller, although, ran into some problems, and again, radiator problems, and was forced to land in Pennsylvania for repairs, while Gardner made it all the way to New York in 9 hours and 18 minutes, which was a record. However, not all went smooth. As Gardner landed in New York, his plane did a somersault upon landing. He got a little too zealous there, I guess, and he was okay. He was okay, and he did make that record. And here's the Gardner stone here. Here's the Gardner stone, and I believe this one with the orange cone next to it is Eddie Gardner. Yeah, you could see the airplane on this. Let's wipe this off here. Can. Yeah, this is where Eddie Gardner is buried. The first man to fly airmail route from New York to Chicago and back. And that was over 100 years ago. Just amazing. So after that, though, Gardner had a little bit of a misfortune. About 10 days later, he was flying to Cleveland, or flying out of Cleveland, was not able to gain altitude, and crashed into a couple of homes. Fortunately, he was not injured, and the people in the homes were not injured. He left the airmail service back in August or April of 1919. And after he left the airmail service, he flew around the country and did fairs and shows. And in August 1920, he won Wisconsin's first air derby. But unfortunately, May 6, 1921, Mr. Gardner met his fate. He was performing at a county fair in Nebraska when reportedly his goggles, he borrowed goggles from another pilot. The goggles didn't fit correctly. They slid down, obstructed his view. His plane went into a nosedive that he was not able to get out of. And unfortunately, Mr. Gardner crashed. He did survive, was pulled from the wreckage, but unfortunately his injuries were too severe, and he succumbed to his injuries shortly after in the hospital. So that's the story of Eddie Gardner here in Plainfield, Illinois. The first man to fly airmail from New York to Chicago and back. Quite remarkable. Okay, another great tombstone in here. So if you look at this, it looks like we have a soldier here saluting another soldier there, and something here that I can't quite make out. Or he's waving goodbye. I assume they were soldiers. Maybe they're not. H.R. Alsbrook, it looks like, died 1862. So maybe it is Civil War. Not sure. And then there's some that are in here. That one's a little hard to read. Died looks like 56. Okay, I'm going to let the emergency vehicles pass, and I'll be back. Okay, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that story of Eddie Gardner. And, I was kind of geeked out about it. I've been in around aviation most of my life. I'm currently working aviation, so it kind of geeks me out to bring you a story about aviation. Well, I wish I could spend some more time in here. I'm getting cold. Great cemetery, as you can see here. I mean, just look at that. I can spend a lot of time in here, but it is getting cold out here. Thank you for joining me, and until next time, keep exploring.